2024 Naomi C. Chase Lecture in Children's Literature, The Wonder of It All, featuring award-winning author Jacqueline Briggs Martin, April 16, 2024, z.umn.edu/chase2024.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Marek Kozievich. I'm the Henry Professor of Children's and Young Adult Literature at the College of Education and Human Development, and we have a children's literature program at Curriculum and Instruction. We're very proud of it. And on behalf of Lisa Vondrasek, curator of the Curlin, my own, our Department of Curriculum and Instruction, Curlin Friends, our graduate students in children's literature who are here, we want to welcome you to the 2024 Chase Lecture in Children's Literature. We also want to acknowledge our thanks as the University of Minnesota community to this land and to the indigenous people who have been stewards of this land for a very long time, way before the university was even imagined. And so we acknowledge with gratitude the care, the stewardship, the values, earth-centric values that inform the Ojibwe and Dakota people's lives. We take inspiration from their work in our children's literature program. This is the title, but I want to talk briefly about the Chase Lecture, the origin of the Chase Lecture. The Chase is named after Naomi Chase, who was a classroom teacher and became professor in our college in 1950. In over 26 years career as a professor of children's literature, she inspired generations of students. And one of the things they did with her younger colleague, Noreen Odland, they created a course, which was a summer school probably, called Writing for and by Children. And part of this course was a talk, a guest talk by a visiting author of children's books or illustrator. And since, I think, 1980, this lecture became, thanks to generosity of Julie Jensen and a bunch of friends, our college is able to sponsor this event yearly. So now we're in our 44th year. This is Naomi C. Chase Lecture in Children's Literature. And why are we doing this? So the goal is to put quality time into thinking about the wonder of children's literature, about the miracle of the creative process, and how it all comes together and how it transforms people's lives. So we invite authors each year, spectacular, accomplished, award-winning authors, and this year we were extremely lucky to have Jackie Briggs Martin, and Jackie is incredible as an author, and part of this incredible part comes from, really her superpowers as a wizard of words, and with uncanny ability to find interesting topics, great perspectives, and then weave it together into one-of-a-kind story. And Jackie has published, I think, 21 picture books so far.
I don't know.
Yeah, we've lost track. Like, we don't know anymore. But some of the titles you may be familiar with, and I want to look at my notes because of the names of the awards. So I think one of the earliest was Snowflake Bentley, which won the Caldecott Award, Caldecott Medal. Then Creek Finding, a True Story, which received the Green Earth Award for Environmental Writing for Children, and a Riverby Award, which is for exceptional nonfiction natural history books for children. Some other titles include, and we have some of the books on the table there and also in the lobby. We have Chef Roy Choi and the Street Food Remix, which received the Cybert Honor, Orbis Pictus Honor, and it also launched the Food Hero series, right?
It was part of the Food Hero.
It was part of the Food Hero series. And then, of course, Begin with a B, which is a brilliant, wonderful book, which received the Riverby Award and was also named the Green Earth Honor book. So some people think that it's strange for one author to have won so many awards. But I think it only shows that human brains were not designed for thinking, but maybe cooling blood. But for people who know Jackie's work, this is not strange at all. What is amazing is the quality and depth of her stories. and the incredible power of these stories they have. They live forever, and they inspire generations and generations of young people. Also amazing is Jackie's willingness to share her expertise with others, because she's been on faculty at Hamline University's law residency, MFA in writing for children and young adults, and also she taught creative writing at the University of Iowa Summer Writing Festival. So it's such a privilege to host her, to have her with us today. Please help me welcome the one and only amazing writer, Jackie Briggs Martin. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you, Mary. I hope you won't be disappointed. After that introduction, I feel like I should fly. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, Lisa, for inviting me here. Thank you to all who have made our 2 days here so wonderful. It's been great to be back in the Twin Cities, and I have loved seeing friends who live here. So thank you all. And for this talk, I am so happy to be here. I love making stories, and I love talking about making stories. I am also really pleased to be part of this series of lectures that honor Dr. Naomi Chase, because I've always felt like educators and writers are partners. Without educators, we writers would be telling our stories to empty rooms. You are the people who share our books with your students. You are the people who give our books a wider audience. So I want to thank the teachers who are here and the teachers who are listening for what you have done to share our books. And the future teachers, I want to thank you for what you will do to share our books. And I also want to thank all of you for coming out on a rainy night to be here. And I know many people are attending online, so thank you too for taking time to sit in front of your television and be part of this conversation. The people who have heard me talk before will have heard this quote, because I love thinking about this and I love saying it. Robert Olin Butler said, "Fiction is the art form of human yearning." I think that nonfiction is the art form of human sharing. We nonfiction writers are saying to readers, look at this interesting person, this situation, this historic event, these wonders. Which wonders do we nonfiction writers choose to share? As I look back over my writing and I think ahead to the books I want to write, I realize that my taste in subject matter is shaped by my childhood. I grew up on a dairy farm in Maine, and that is a picture of the buildings of the farm that I grew up on. My 3 brothers, 2 sisters, my parents, and 1 great-great uncle lived in the upstairs apartment of that farmhouse on the right side of the picture. We were crowded. We slept 3, even 4, to a bedroom in that farmhouse. So I loved getting outside and walking the lanes and fields of the farm. Under the hill, at the end of the lane, was a small grove of pine trees. I used to walk down that lane, sit under the pine trees, and listen to the wind whisper through the branches. Since that time, I have loved being outside, and I have found spirituality, healing, joy, and much wonder in the natural world. And because I love the outdoors, and it's been so important to me, that's where I now find many of my stories. So this afternoon, I want to talk about wonder, encouraging a sense of wonder in young readers, sharing experiences of wonder. First, we will look at what wonder is, or what I think wonder is. Then, why we might want to share that with young children, how we do that, and finally, the pleasures, the rewards of doing that. So, let's begin. When I think of my own experiences with wonder, they involve awe, the wow, that is so cool factor. They involve mystery, amazement, joy, and often healing. I want to tell you a story about wonder. Last fall, a person very dear to my husband Rich and me passed away suddenly. He was one of Rich's older brothers, and he was a pole star, a north star. We looked up to him in both of our lives. We were adrift in grief. At that same time, we read in our local paper that a water bird called a limpkin, which is native to Florida, had made its way into our neighborhood in Iowa. The next morning, we went out to look for it, and we found it. It's very well camouflaged, but it's over there on the right side of the picture. It's a pretty good-sized bird. Every morning, for 5 mornings, we drove out to see the limpkin. We watched it poke around in the mud for freshwater mussels, bang away with its beak to make a hole in the mussel shell, and find its breakfast. And it would drop it on the sand and pound away until it made a hole. There was certainly awe and wonder in seeing that limpkin. There was mystery. How did it get to Iowa? Why did it get to Iowa? And there was a bit of balm for our sadness. The natural world seemed to be telling us there is more. There is beauty. The sun will continue to rise, limpkins will eat mussels, and egrets will watch for fish. So for me, the what of wonder is awe, amazement, mystery, beauty, balm. And I even think when we see something that is wondrous to us, it's a little bit like falling in love with a part of the world all over again. If you have had a butterfly land on your hand or you see a bumblebee up close, it's magical. And it is, I think, kind of like falling in love all over again. Why do we want to share? First, I want to share with you, if you don't know what this is, it's a monarch butterfly chrysalis. And what is wondrous to me about that chrysalis is, of course, the whole chrysalis thing, how they change, but that beading of gold around the chrysalis is just amazing. It's so beautiful. What does it do? Why is it there? The mystery of wonder. So the what of wonder is an important part of the why of wonder. Just as the what of a hot fudge sundae, the gooey chocolate, the sweet cold ice cream, is an important part of the why of hot fudge sundaes. But the why of wonder deserves more than just a glib analogy. As I have worked on this talk this afternoon, I have also been aware of this particular time in the world. There are places in the world in desperate conditions. Starvation and hunger haunt us. Killing and dying are daily facts. Injustices hang in the air like pollutants. One part of my brain says, how dare I talk about wonder and the green earth when there is so much sorrow in the world? And another part of my brain says, how can I not talk about wonder right now? We need wonder. Just as Rich and I needed the limpkin in our dark time, we all need wonder to help us get through the sorrows of our time, to give us a boost of joy so that we can take action, walk forward, find a way to a better day. We've all heard of the butterfly effect, by which one small action creates a great change. We need wonder to help us get to some small action. And, selfishly speaking, sharing wonder expands it for the sharer. Sharing wonder is fun. When I share a wonder, I feel it more. And honestly, who can hold in the secret of seeing an owl land on a tree branch outside the bedroom window, or of seeing a double rainbow across the street? We all know that sharing wonder makes it more real for us. Sharing the gift of wonder is a gift to ourselves. Rachel Carson made her own beautiful case for the why of sharing wonder with children in her article, Help Your Child to Wonder, first published in Woman's Home Companion, and republished posthumously as a book, The Sense of Wonder. She writes, if I had influence with the good fairy who is supposed to preside over the christening of all children, I should ask that her gift to each child in the world be a sense of wonder so indestructible that it would last throughout life as an unfailing antidote against the boredom and disenchantments of later years. The sterile preoccupation with things that are artificial, the alienation from our sources of strengths. She goes on to say, if a child is to keep alive his inborn sense of wonder without any such gift from the fairies, he needs the companionship of at least one adult who can share it, rediscovering with him the joy, excitement, and mystery of the world we live in. That is my goal as a writer, to be one of those adults who shares wonder, gives each reader a chance to feel the joy, excitement, and mystery of the natural world. Carson says the experience of wonder is a balance against disenchantments, which I take to include difficulties, disappointment, struggles, even pains of childhood. In spite of all, we can experience the beauty of a snowflake or a whelk shell. If wonder is a moment of falling in love with a small piece of the world, it can also foster a caretaking stance toward the world. We have to love something before we are willing to tend it. In writing Begin with a B, my co-writers, Phyllis Root, Liza Ketchum, and I, as well as our wonderful illustrator, Claudia McGeehee, hope the story of the Rusty Patch Bumblebee would spur readers to watch for bees, think about their amazing, indeed wondrous lives, and then plant flowers for bees. We hoped wonder would lead to love and lead to care and tending. And I am so happy tonight that Phyllis and Liza are here with us. And I hope that you will wave and smile to everybody so they know where you are. Thank you, too. This seems actually a good spot to share the beginning of that book with you. What's inside this hole in the ground? One bee, one queen Rusty Patch Bumblebee, waiting all winter long. And here's the wonder. It still seems wondrous to me. Her tiny body, not even an inch, holds everything she needs to create a whole colony of bees. This year's bees. What else waits all winter under the ground? Seeds and roots for flowers that bloom early and late. Flowers with nectar and pollen for bees. Sunshines, earthworms, seeds and roots sprout and grow. Flowers open, and that one queen Rusty Patch Bumblebee crawls from the ground, flies flower to flower. Maybe plum blossom, wild geranium, shooting star. What is she searching for? Oops. What is she searching for? Nectar and pollen. She eats, 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 and eats, then zigs and zags, flying low. Where will she rest? Underground best. An abandoned mouse burrow, an old mole hole, or a hollow stump, a fallen tree. Even an empty coat pocket will do. What will she make when she finds a nest? All by herself. She builds a pot with wax from her body and fills it with nectar for days too cold or rainy to fly, and days she sits on the eggs she will lay. All by herself she carries pollen in the pollen baskets on her back legs. Once in the nest, she shapes a lumpy pollen ball, then lays her eggs, seals each safe inside. All by herself, she sits on the eggs and shivers to keep them warm. She does it. They all do it. It's a wonder. Well, the eggs hatch into larvae, then become pupae, and finally bees. The worker bees then take over all those chores she has done, feeding the larvae, and the queen stays in the nest and lays eggs for the rest of the summer. And all those eggs are in her body when she is hibernating all winter long. The pollen that she eats in the spring somehow fertilizes the eggs so they are ready to be laid. It's a wonder. Phyllis, Liza, and I, and Claudia, hoped sharing that wonder might lead readers to become better caretakers. And we added at the back 10 things we all can help do to care for bees. We also hoped that the wonder of bumblebees might make readers curious to know more. So you can see that we added additional information about the lives of bumblebees. It was the curiosity side of wonder that led me to do the research for creek finding for Mike Osterholm's Brook Creek. One morning, I was reading our local paper, and I saw this story of one man, Mike Osterholm, who was on the faculty here at the University of Minnesota, and also owned property in northeast Iowa, near the area where he grew up. This property used to be a farm, and Mike wanted to restore the prairie in the valley. It had been a cornfield. He wanted to turn it back into prairie land. Well, he was standing in that cornfield one day working, probably planting or something, and somebody came by and told Mike he had caught a trout in that field when he was a boy. It was a field. How did he catch a trout in a field? Well, Mike realized that there must have been a creek running through that field at one time. And the article said Mike had restored that creek. How does that happen? I wondered. I called the reporter and said, I need to know more about this story. He said, here's Mike's email. Email Mike. So I did. That very morning, I emailed Mike. 20 minutes later, I got an email back. Call me. So I called him. That morning, we talked for a half an hour, and he told me what he had done, and I thought, this is going to be great. And it was. We had a number of conversations. Rich and I actually drove 5 hours to hear Mike speak, and so I researched that book, worked on it. I learned that the neighbors said, it can't be done. The water will just seep into the ground. Mike persisted. Someone gave him an aerial map of his farm that had been taken in the late 40s. And Claudia actually copied that aerial map. So this map in the book is the aerial map that Mike saw. He used that map to mark the creek, and then excavators dug out the creek. He put rocks on the bottom and plants on the sides of the creek, and after a number of years, the creek was ready for brook trout, the little fingerlings. They survived and grew and reproduced, and Mike had done it, restored a trout stream. Once the stream was there, the ecosystem restored itself. Birds, bugs, and frogs came back. In fact, the newspaper article said all the frogs in Iowa, all the species of frogs in Iowa, could be found at that creek. I was curious. I thought, how do frogs find a creek that didn't used to be there? Do they have like a frog phone system? Hey, buddies, get up here. It's good. There's a new creek. I had to find out the answer. So I began researching the story, and eventually I went up to Mike's Brook Creek. And here's Mike and me and Claudia McGehee, who did the bee book and the creek book, up beside Brook Creek. I loved Mike's story, and I was so happy to tell it. There is so much wonder in it. The water remembered the path. The frogs came back. And I learned that frogs travel during rainy weather, looking for good places to live. So on rainy days, they're moving around, looking for a spot to live, and that's how they found Mike's Brook Creek. I wrote another story, steeped in wonder, about Mike Osterholm's property. It's called The Fire That Brought the Birds, and is about Mike's restoration of an oak savanna. An oak savanna is part of the prairie, actually. It's a hillside next to a prairie that is a combination of trees and prairie plants. In pre-European settlement days, they burned when the prairie burned. So all of the scrubby brush and stuff that might be growing in that oak woods would be burned out. And oak trees have thick bark, so they don't burn. Well, once Europeans came and settled, they didn't want those fires anymore because they had family living there. And they had crops they were growing and building, so nobody wanted fires. And the fires stopped happening, so scrubby brush could grow and other kinds of trees could grow, and the savannas became degraded. Mike wanted to restore his savanna, and he set about doing it. The story, I want to read you a little bit of it because there's wonder in this story too. And the story is in 3 parts. The first is the part I was telling you about, the savanna before Europeans settled. The second is after there were no fires, when it became degraded and cluttered. And the third is Mike's restoration. And that's what I'm going to read to you, the third part. So here goes. What other colors of bringing back what used to be? Brown and white and black, the foraging goats that Mike brought in to munch and crunch the weedy, woody plants. Brown, the trunks and branches of the trees, too tall for goats, that Mike and his friends hauled out of the oak woods. Red, the flames of the fires the friends carefully started under the oaks to burn dry weeds and twiggy scruff. Sooty, the nourishing ground waiting for sprouts. Gray-green, the fiddle-shaped leaves of oaks that grew strong, not crowded, not shaded. What are the colors of 10 years' time in this oak savanna? Orange, the sun that shines on the oaks and grows the hundreds of acorns strong oaks drop, warms the soil that waits for rain. Green gold, the ground soaked by rain, covered with prairie plants, lead plant, culver's root, goldenrod, coneflower, that grew from seeds that waited in the dark 100 years for the right mix of warmth and water, and now call to bugs, bees, birds after the long silence. Seeds in the ground for 100 years, just waiting for the right conditions. Both of Mike's stories remind us that the earth wants to heal itself, wants to be whole. We share wonder because wonder can give us hope. One of the great joys of being a writer is that I am constantly learning, constantly astonished by the way the earth has put itself together over the last millions of years. Because of my childhood on the farm, I love writing about farming, whether in the country or the city. Farmer Will Allen and the Growing Table is a true story of an amazing urban farmer in Milwaukee. Farmer Eva's Green Garden Life, which is coming out in June, is a true story of a woman who has supported herself for 40 years on 3 acres of land. When I learned of her, I was curious. I live in Iowa. In Iowa, farms are hundreds of acres and tractors are bigger than houses. So I was also intrigued by the many sides of Eva's character. She writes poetry, rescues salamanders, reads Middle English. I visited Eva's farm. dug dandelions with her, helped her plant, tasted the sorrel that grew all around. That, by the way, is not a dandelion. That is, I know some of you in the audience would know that's not a dandelion. That is horseradish. I read a book about Eva written by a Boston chef, Dee Dee Emmons. There are many newspaper articles about Eva, many magazine articles. I read all I could find. I thought this was going to be a fun story about a quirky farmer. But then I heard Eva talking about the soil, what goes on in the soil. I grew up with my toes in the dirt, but I had no idea of all the action in the soil. Plant roots and soil microbes have evolved together over millions of years. It's not all competition in the natural world. There is so much synergy. For me, it's an underground wonder. Here's how wonder shows up in Farmer Eva's green garden life. In the middle of the farm busyness, Eva began to wonder what was really going on under her garden boots. She read about soil, talked with soil scientists, learned of all the helpful critters, earthworms, centipedes, pillbugs, and the microbes too tiny for us to see that live in the brown underground. Eva learned that the critters in the soil eat decaying plant parts and poop out plant food. And the microbes partner with the plants too. Here's how that works. Eva's plants use sunshine and water to make sugars they need to grow. The sugars that plants don't use come out through their roots. Microbes feast on those sugars and each other, and they help plant roots get more nutrients from the soil. It's an eat-around underground cafe. Plants feed microbes. Microbes help plants get nitrogen, other minerals, and water. Knowing all that is going on in healthy soil changes the way we think about the earth under our feet and the way we think about taking care of the soil. One reason I love telling the story of Eva's farm and her life is she gets it. She is always aware of the wonder. Here's a bit more. Eva's farm is also home to small wonders. She grows flowers for pollinators such as butterflies and bees. She walks carefully around nesting killdeer and garden toads. One year, on a warm, wet spring night, Eva organized a salamander brigade to carry migrating crawlers across a busy road next to her farm, to help them go from their forest home to the pond to lay eggs. Since then, Eva and the brigade have saved hundreds of salamanders. We share wonder because wonder can remind us to look longer, even as something as common as the ground under our feet or little critters on their way to the next generation. So just to recap the whys of sharing wonder, it's a gift to the sharer, a bit of light in a dark time, an invitation to love a bit of the world and take care of that bit, a spur to curiosity, to asking questions, a reason for hope, to remember that the earth wants to heal itself, a reason to look longer, to pay attention. Now for the how. And this is Brook Creek. This is Mike's Creek. In these snippets of stories I have read, you can hear how I and Phyllis and Liza and I have written about wonder. But I am not the only children's book writer dedicated to writing about wonder. So I thought it might be fun to take a closer look at a couple of other writers and some of the tools that writers can use. We could spend hours talking about these tools, but I know we don't have hours. So we'll just look briefly at 1, the tools of poetry, 2, the voice of a book or the style of the writing, and 3, characterization. April Pulley Sayre is one of my favorite writers of children, and she wrote wonderfully about wonder. She said, "My life goal is to share wonder, especially about nature and science." And I took a few pages from her book, Vulture View, because her language is so wonderful. Isn't that a great vulture up there? I love it. Listen for Sayre's language. Wings stretch wide to catch a ride on warming air. Going where? Or this one. Vultures like a mess. They land and dine. Rotten is fine. The sun starts to sink. Down, down. The air starts to cool. Down, down. Wings glide. Wings ride through cooling air. Going where? Down, down, down. Sayre uses the tools of poetry, repetition, rhyme, alliteration, to convey wonder, even about vultures, the garbage crew of the natural world. April Pulley Sayre was a poet and a scientist. She died much too soon, but we do have the treasure of her books. Another book that I love is The Blue Whale by Jenny Desmond. She wants to convey the wondrous size of the blue whale. She writes, a blue whale can measure up to 100 feet. Well, who knows what 100 feet is, especially if you're 8 years old. You don't know what 100 feet is. So then she says, a blue whale is the same length as a truck, a digger, a boat, a car, a bicycle, a motorcycle, a van, and a tractor, all lined up. And there we see them. Now we have an idea. And she says, a blue whale's heart is the biggest of any animal. It's as big as a small car. And there's the small car, and weighs about 1,300 pounds. She also tells us that a blue whale weighs 160 tons. We can't even imagine 160 tons, but it's the same as a heap of 55 hippopotamuses. Isn't that great? I love that slide. Style, the way a book sounds, can also work to convey wonder. One summer, Phyllis and I did a picture book biography workshop at Hamline. We thought some of our students might want to write a biography for kids. In preparing for those sessions, we read a lot of picture books and picture book biographies. As we were reading these books, it became clear that the style of these books was not the same. It varied depending on who was the subject of the biography. And I realized in a way that I hadn't before that when I was writing picture book biographies, in order to write them, I had actually crafted a voice for the books. When I was writing Snowflake Bentley, in addition to the research that I did, I listened to Robert Frost reading his own poetry. Frost was a neighbor of Bentley's. He lived just across the state line between Vermont and New Hampshire, in New Hampshire. And they were nearly contemporaries. Snowflake Bentley was only 9 years older than Robert Frost. I wanted to get Frost's rhythms in my head. They seemed to be right for Snowflake Bentley's story. I wanted to live in the story, and not in 20th century Iowa, but back in the time of Wilson Bentley, 19th century Vermont. I even read Robert Frost's articles on chicken farming. He was a chicken farmer before a poet, and he wrote these articles because he didn't make a lot of money as a chicken farmer, so he sold articles. So writers out there, if you're not making a lot of money, get some chickens. When I came to write the story of Snowflake Bentley, I imagined myself in Wilson Bentley's kitchen, writing at his big kitchen table. I had to picture myself in Los Angeles to work on the story of Chef Roy Choi and the street food remix with June Jolie. Roy Choi grew up in LA, and he served gourmet food out of a food truck. He changed the way people feel about food trucks, made them cool. When June Jolie and I were telling his story, we tried to give Chef Roy Choi a hip-hop sound because he loves hip-hop music and he loves LA. So we researched. We went to LA. We listened to hip-hop, to Roy's favorite artists and others. We read hip-hop poems. So here's the beginning of Chef Roy Choi and the Street Food Remix. Chef Roy Choi can chop an onion in an instant, carve a mouse out of a mushroom. He's cooked in fancy restaurants for rock stars and royalty, but he'd rather cook on a truck. He wants outsiders, low riders, kids, teens, shufflers, and skateboarders to have food cooked with care, with love, with sewn mat. And here's from Snowflake Bentley. In the days when farmers worked with ox and sled and cut the dark with lantern light, there lived a boy who loved snow more than anything else in the world. Different stories, different people, different styles. The last tool I want to talk about is how we create the characters for our stories. And by characters, I don't just mean the humans. It's how we feel about and portray all of the beings in our stories. And maybe some of you have read Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I see some heads nodding. She talks about how Native Americans impart spirits to what others might call objects in the natural world. She suggests that trees, rocks, rivers have spirits that we can talk to and learn from. I certainly felt the spirits of trees as a kid when I sat in that pine grove. Those tall trees were watching out for me. Even before I read Braiding Sweetgrass, we had a neighbor, a third grader, who used to talk to trees on her way to school. And I wondered if the trees were helping her get ready for school. If we imbue the articles of nature with a spirit, we are closer to them. We have a deeper sense that we live under the sun together. And as I was looking at my own work, preparing for our time here, I realized that I have done that occasionally, perhaps because trees, rivers, stones are such important parts of my life. So the creek and creek finding, the water can remember, the creek can laugh, tickled by trout, the creek can chuckle, a thanks. In Farmer Eva's Green Garden Life, the underground is an eat-around cafeteria. And you may remember that Phyllis and Liza and I did not impart laughter or chuckles to the Rusty Patch bumblebees. We don't want to go over the line to anthropomorphizing. But we can give a voice to trees, as Kristen O'Connell George did in Old Elm Speaks. Old Elm says, "It is as I told you, young sapling. It will take autumns of patience before you snag your first moon." Isn't that wonderful? In My Mighty Journey, John Coy lets the waterfall tell its story. Minneapolis' own St. Anthony Falls says, "I am a powerful waterfall. I listen, I pay attention, I have a long memory. You might find it hard to believe, but I have moved through time." In an author's and illustrator's note for My Mighty Journey, John Coy and Gaylord Shanalik say they collaborated on the book for years. The how of sharing wonder can take a while. It took 3 drafts and more than a year to write Snowflake Bentley, more than a year for creek finding, many drafts, several years, and a pandemic to write Farmer Eva's Green Garden Life. But these stories of wonder demand to be told, and they won't let us quit until we figure out how to do it. We are often rewarded for our telling by letters from kids and parents. Kids who say they look for snowflakes on their coat sleeves and find them. Kids who tell us they watch for bumblebees or look for frogs. Adult fly fishers who tell me they love stories of trout streams. And I want to share just a couple of letters that came to my webpage. I am an outdoor ed teacher at a public school. Think ecology, ancestral skills, etc. I love your book, Creek Finding. I am preparing to teach a leadership unit on conservation heroes and would like to use the book as a resource for inspiration. Or this from a dad. Thank you so much for your wonderful informational book about Snowflake Bentley. My 8-year-old daughter Rachel and I sat and read this book together. We thoroughly enjoyed it, especially that it was filled with information about his life. We wanted to let you know how much we appreciated your book. I want to invite you all in joining me in finding and sharing wonder. Sharing wonder is just that, sharing. We and those we share with are equals, standing together in awe and enchantment of the moment. So you may be the teacher and they may be the child and you may be decades older than they, but in that moment with that butterfly or that little ladybug or that snowflake, you are the same because you are enthralled by it. We are called out of ourselves, our burdens, and our bit of love for that wonder before us. Wonder is a result of and a spur to paying attention, to looking longer at the limpkin, the butterfly, or the bumblebee. And some writers, such as Thomas Berry and Elizabeth Rush, say this looking longer takes us into the great conversation between humans and other forms of life, which can help us all to be less lonely and maybe to consider ourselves in a more balanced place on the web of life. Perhaps we are not at the center or the top of the pyramid. Looking for wonder to share reminds us all of the riches available to us every day. When I first got here, Phyllis took us to Hennepin Park, Minnehaha Park, and we saw this fields of bloodroot right here in the city. It's all around us. Janice Ray, in Ecology of a Cracker Childhood, says she learned as a child that nature never says you can't play. Nature is always ready to share. I would like to leave you with these wonderful lines from Mary Oliver. When it's over, I want to say that all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was a bridegroom taking the world into my arms. Let's help those we know and care for be married to amazement, take the world into their arms. Thank you.
All right. We'll start with 2-3 questions on stage and then open the floor to questions. Thank you, Jackie. When we talked before the event, you mentioned that you've recently been thinking about wonder as a dialogue, as not just a reaction of a human in contact with or in appreciation of something else, but more of a process. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Well, in the past, I have thought about wonder as a more passive thing. We see butterfly or a rusty patch bumblebee, and we appreciate it. We take it into our spirits. But I actually have come to consider it a more active process. Not like I wonder where I left my car keys, but more like we are changed by what we see and we respond to it in some way that changes us, that we learn from whatever that experience is. It might be that bloodroot. It might be something we didn't expect, like the eclipse last week. I don't know if any of you, I don't know what kind of coverage you had here in cloudy, right? You didn't see it. Sorry about that. We did not have great coverage, but we saw it. It wasn't that cloudy. So whatever it is that we experience, I think we are more active in that experience than I had originally thought. I thought it was sort of imprinted on us, but I think it changes our being. I think we are changed and we perhaps devote attention to paying attention to that. We look longer and we somehow are not the same after we have that experience.
Yes. Can you talk more about the Food Hero series? Because you mentioned them here, but some of the joys or maybe challenges of working on these books.
Okay. The Food Heroes series started with the urban farmer, Will Allen. And I was looking for a farming story to write, and I thought, urban farms, who thinks of farms in the city? So I thought I would find a farm in the East, in the Midwest, and the West. And I did some research, and then I thought, I think for young readers, one farm would be easier to pay attention to, be interested in. And this farm in Milwaukee is right in the city, started with 6 broken down greenhouses, and it was close enough I could go to it. And I thought that would be good. So that was the first one. And people liked it. So that was good. And my publisher, Philip Lee, said, what would you like to do next? And I said, I would like to write a book about Alice Waters, a woman hero who really changed the way restaurants think about where they get their food and what they do to it. Alice Waters said, if you have a good peach, don't do anything to it. Just find the best peach you can and serve it. And if you go to some restaurants now, you'll find they list the farms they get their food on the wall somewhere, and that is Alice Waters. So we did that one, and then Philip said, there's this guy, Roy Choi, in LA, who serves food out of a food truck. He's a well-trained chef, but he has his food truck. And he was an immigrant. He came to the US at 2 years old. And I read a book about him, and I thought, yeah, I'd like to write about him. He didn't have an easy journey. But I said to Philip, I grew up on a farm that had been in my family for 7 generations. I don't have the immigrant experience. I can't really write about the immigrant experience. I wonder if your wife, June, would like to write with me, because she is an immigrant from Korea, and she would know that piece in a way that I do not. So June Jolie and I collaborated on Chef Roy Choi, and we had a wonderful time. While we were out in LA, we didn't just research hip hop. We had to eat at Korean restaurants, of course. So then we found this guy, Sandor Katz, who grew up in New York City, thought he would always live in New York City, but he learned as a young man that he was HIV positive, and this was before there was a cure for AIDS. So that was kind of a bad thing for him to learn, and it totally changed his life. He left New York City. He moved to a queer community in Tennessee, and he was in charge of the gardens. And when the cabbage came in, it was a lot of cabbage, and he didn't know what to do, but he remembered sauerkraut, and so he made sauerkraut. And he had so much fun making sauerkraut that he went all over the country, and now he goes all over the world talking about fermentation. Well, we wrote this book. We had a wonderful time. It has a recipe for fermentation in it. But I will tell you, because you're educators, and you're going to be educators, and this may be something that you run into, this book has not sold in a lot of places where it might sell because it has one word in it. He moved to a queer community in Tennessee. And there are a lot of places in our country right now that are just very afraid of that word. And I hope we get over that soon, because we're just losing so much richness if we don't read all the books about all the people who live in our country. And the last book in the Food Hero series is the one I told you about, the last one we have done so far. I hope we're not done. Farmer Eva and the Green Garden Life. So,
wonderful, thank you. Let's open the questions, the floor.
So when I looked at your books, one thing that I noticed is that you've done a lot of collaboration. Many children's illustrators or children's writers just write by themselves, but you collaborate a lot with other people. Can you talk about that process and what you like about it, or don't like about it? Well, they're sitting right there.
Oh, I like everything about collaborating. You know, writers sit by themselves and they write something and they think, is this any good? I don't know. You read it the next day and you think, no, this is really not that good. I better write something else. If you working with other people, they can tell you right away that it's not good, and so you don't spend all that time. And they often help. I mean, we work together, we fix it. So somebody has an idea and somebody says, I love it. Or maybe they have an idea and say, what if we did it this way? Usually when you collaborate, or at least this has been my case, and I know another person that I have not collaborated said, somebody is in the driver's seat when you're writing together. So somebody writes a draft. And Phyllis and Liza and I have collaborated on 3 books now. 2 of them will be out next year. One is about turtles and one is about trees. Both have wonder in them. Phyllis did 1 first draft, Liza did 1 first draft, and I did 1 first draft. And then we all look at it and think, where are the weak spots? Where are the strong spots? What do we need to do next? And we go over it again and again and again and do more research, make more additions. But it's such a joint process. I guess if you were going to build an outdoor kiln, you could do it by yourself or you could do it with other people. And I think doing it with other people would be more fun. And it's true of writing too. For me, doing it with other people is fun.
We have a question from an online
Yeah,
audience.
from our live stream. The question is, did you always have an interest in these topics growing up? Did you always have wonder growing up? And what has been your favorite adventure?
Oh my gosh. I was always interested in the sounds of words growing up. I lived near 2 rivers, the Nezinskat and the Androscoggin, and I loved the names of those rivers. And the cows on our farm were Holsteins, black and white cows, but they were registered Holsteins, and they had names. We had a cow named River Flat Blanche, Wisconsin. Isn't that great? I love that name. So when I wrote a book that had a cow in it, I named her Blanche, Wisconsin, because Wisconsin is a good word. As a kid, I just loved the sound of words. And I had an imaginary playmate. I didn't think I'll grow up and be a writer because we didn't have that many books. We had a lot of fairy tales, but who wrote those? Who knows? But I did know I loved the sounds of words, and I did have this imagination. Let's see, what else? Was I interested in these topics? I think my interest was that I loved the outside world. I loved the trees. I loved the little flowers called lambkill that grew along the edge of the lane. So I guess it was there in some nascent form.
Since these are nonfiction, can you speak a little bit to the amount of research and the process and kind of how you start that journey, how you know which rabbit holes to go down, which ones not to?
I often go down the wrong ones. I think I learn as much as I can. And in some cases, there's a really lot to be learned. In other cases, there's not so much. With Snowflake Bentley, nobody had written very much about him. So there wasn't, I found articles that he had written, and I found one biography of him. There was a person actually working on an adult biography at the same time I was working on my book that came out just after Snowflake Bentley. But I read all that I could. I read until I was reading stuff I already had read before for that one. We did a lot of research for Begin with the Bee. You always learn more than you can put in the book. And part of the challenge is which rabbit hole are you going to write about and which one are you going to let go? And that can be really hard. And I think what we found when we were doing the B book is you have to figure out the form of the book. And Phyllis and Liza, chime in here and correct me if I'm remembering wrong. You kind of have to figure out what the theme is and how you want it to go so that you know what's going to contribute to that theme and what's going to lead you off your track. I hope that makes sense. I hope that answered your question. I actually love doing the research too. It's really so exciting to learn new things, whether or not you use them.
Is there a moment during one of your research periods that inspired a particularly momentous moment, a feeling of serendipity or a sense of fate?
Oh, that's a good question. I will tell you a moment that was really changed what I planned to do. I don't know if I felt a sense of fate, but I felt, oh, the story is over here. I wanted to write about a kid on boat because schooners used to be gone for long times, and sometimes the captain would take his wife and his child, and they'd have pigs and cows, so they'd have food. And I thought, wow, that would be really interesting. I'd like to do that. I'd like to write about that, learn about it, and write about it. So I was reading a magazine and reading about these schooner trips, and on the next page, right next to it, which is one of the good things about using magazines or things that are not online because you see other things, was an article about water dowsing. Do you all know what water dowsing is? You go out in a field, say in Maine, and you have a Y-shaped branch, and you walk along holding the upper part of the Y, so the bottom part of the Y is out in front of you. And if you pass underground water, the bottom part of the Y goes down. I'm not making it up. It really happens, and it's a wonder. People can do it. I don't know if anybody here in this room knows anybody who's a water dowser. Do you? So you know it happens.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I thought, do you, Liza? Yeah. I bet some Vermonters do it. I thought, even before I was thinking about wonder, I thought, this is a wonder. We don't know why it happens this way. And I wish I could make you see. Can I have your microphone? Sure. So this is part of the Y. And there's another part coming out here. You walk along and the stick goes down. I thought, I have to write about that for kids. So I abandoned the boat story, and I started writing about water dowsing. And I wrote The Water Gift and the Pig of the Pig, which was a while ago, so it's out of print. I don't know. Maybe Lisa has a copy of it, but do you? You have it? I loved writing that book. I loved being in that world with that water dowser. So that is accidental research that changed the course of what I was doing. Thank you again for coming. I've so enjoyed talking with all of you, and good luck in your careers as educators.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, everyone.